The crystalline ships appeared without warning above New Terra's capital city, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that hurt human eyes to look upon directly. The Stellar Collective had come to judge humanity's fitness for continued existence as an independent species, and their arrival transformed the Civil War into something far more dangerous for everyone involved. Mary stood in the ancient Whisper installation that served as her command center, watching orbital displays that showed dozens of alien vessels positioning themselves around the planet. Each ship was kilometers long and clearly capable of reducing New Terra to molten rock within minutes. The Collective's technology made both human and Whisper capabilities look primitive by comparison. The lead ship transmitted a message in perfect human languages to every communication device on the planet simultaneously. The voice belonged to something that had never been human, but understood human concepts with disturbing precision. We are the collective that governs this region of space. Humanity has 36 hours to choose representatives for judgment regarding your species' continued independence. Failure to comply will result in systematic containment. Jake's enhanced senses detected energy patterns unlike anything the Whispers had shown him. The collective beings operated on scales of power and time that made their concerns fundamentally different from human or even Whisper perspectives. They viewed the Civil War on New Terra as a minor symptom of larger problems with human expansion into galactic space. Administrator Miller immediately declared himself humanity's representative and demanded that the collective support colonial authority against what he termed genetic terrorists. His broadcasts claimed that the resistance movement represented exactly the kind of chaotic human tendency that required firm control to prevent galactic contamination. Miller positioned himself as the reasonable voice of human responsibility and order. But the collective ignored colonial authority structures completely, instead requesting the presence of individuals whose actions had shaped the current conflict. Mary found herself summoned to appear before beings whose existence spanned millions of years and whose judgment could determine the fate of every human in the galaxy. The Whispers served as translators and guides for the diplomatic encounter, but they warned Mary that the collective operated according to principles that neither humans nor Whispers fully understood. The ancient beings evaluated species based on criteria that included technological development, social organization, and what they termed evolutionary trajectory toward galactic citizenship. Kate, Lucy, and Beth insisted on accompanying their mother to the judgment session, despite the obvious dangers. Their enhanced abilities had been developed through Whisper technology, but the collective possessed the power to reverse those modifications or even eliminate their consciousness entirely. The three young women represented humanity's potential for positive evolution in alliance with alien civilizations. The judgment chamber materialized around them without apparent transition, a space that existed partially in normal reality and partially in dimensions beyond human perception. The collective beings appeared as shifting geometries of light and crystal that suggested vast intelligence operating through forms incomprehensible to biological consciousness. Mary spoke for humanity with the same courage she had shown when facing colonial persecution. She acknowledged that humans had made mistakes in their expansion among the stars, but argued that her daughters represented the potential for growth and positive change. Their combination of human creativity and alien enhancement demonstrated that cooperation was possible between different forms of consciousness. The collective's questions revealed the true scope of their concerns about humanity. Colonial expansion had disrupted established trade routes, interfered with younger species development, and demonstrated aggressive tendencies that reminded older civilizations of previous galactic threats they had been forced to eliminate. Human genetic manipulation programs suggested a species attempting to transform itself into something designed for conquest rather than cooperation. Kate defended humanity's technological development by demonstrating her ability to interface with collective systems without causing damage or attempting unauthorized access. Her respect for alien consciousness while maintaining her human identity impressed beings who had seen many species fail similar tests. She represented a bridge between human potential and galactic standards for technological citizenship. Lucy showcased human adaptability by navigating the judgment chamber's shifting spatial dimensions with grace and purpose. Her enhanced physical capabilities combined with unchanged human emotions and moral reasoning demonstrated that modification could enhance rather than replace essential human characteristics. She proved that enhanced humans could remain fundamentally human while gaining abilities necessary for galactic citizenship. Beth connected directly with the collective's information systems to share her innovations in hybrid human-alien technology. Her creation showed that humans could contribute unique perspectives to galactic technological development, rather than simply consuming resources and territory. Her work represented the possibility of humans becoming valuable partners, rather than threats to galactic stability. The collective's deliberations revealed internal divisions about humanity's fate. Some members advocated immediate containment, based on colonial expansion patterns and genetic manipulation programs. Others saw potential in the resistance movement's demonstration of human adaptability and cooperation with alien civilizations. The judgment balanced on the edge between species survival and extinction. Jake's testimony about indigenous human resistance to colonial oppression provided crucial context for the collective's understanding of human diversity. His people's experience showed that humans were capable of maintaining cultural identity while adapting to alien environments and forming alliances with non-human consciousness. The Modoc warrior tradition represented human potential for honorable behavior, even under extreme pressure. The Whispers advocated for humanity based on their partnership with the resistance movement, but they also revealed disturbing intelligence about the true source of colonial authorities' power. Administrator Miller answered to a rogue faction within the collective itself, beings who had been manipulating human development for their own purposes rather than following established protocols for species evaluation. This revelation transformed the judgment from a simple evaluation of human fitness into an investigation of corruption within the collective's own governing structures. Mary's resistance had inadvertently exposed a conspiracy that threatened the stability of galactic civilization itself. The branded woman who had fled persecution to protect her daughters had uncovered crimes that spanned star systems and species. The trial became a test, not just of humanity's worthiness for independence, but of the collective's own commitment to the principles they claimed to represent. Mary and her daughters found themselves at the center of a galactic political crisis that would reshape relationships between dozens of civilizations. The corrupt faction within the collective had been using human expansion as cover for their own territorial ambitions, manipulating colonial policies to create conflicts that justified their intervention in younger species development. Administrator Miller was simply their tool for implementing policies designed to make humanity appear threatening enough to warrant containment or elimination. As evidence of the conspiracy emerged, the collective faced a choice between admitting their own corruption and proceeding with humanity's destruction to cover their crimes. Mary realized that her family's survival depended not just on proving human worthiness, but on the integrity of beings whose power could reshape entire sectors of space. The judgment would determine whether the ancient alliance between different forms of consciousness could survive the revelation of betrayal at its highest levels. Mary's daughters had become symbols not just of human potential, but of the possibility for justice to transcend the boundaries between species and civilizations. 5 years after Jake Running Bear swore his oath under alien stars, Mary Harrison stood in the gardens of New Harmony, watching her grandchildren play among flowers that grew nowhere else in the galaxy. The hybrid plants represented the same fusion of human and alien knowledge that had transformed their world from a battlefield into a symbol of what cooperation could achieve. The colonial authority had collapsed 3 years ago when the collective's investigation exposed the corruption that had driven human expansion policies. Administrator Miller died in custody while awaiting trial for crimes against multiple species, his genetic purity programs revealed as tools of an alien conspiracy rather than human policy. The branded marks that had once marked women as failures now served as symbols of resistance and genetic diversity. Kate Harrison Chen commanded the Enhanced Human Corps from her headquarters in the former colonial capital, now renamed Haven City, in honor of the settlement that had been destroyed during the early resistance. Her military units protected both human colonies and alien settlements from the extremist groups that still opposed interspecies cooperation. The red brand tattooed on her wrist identified her as the daughter of the cursed mother, who had changed everything. Lucy Harrison Webb directed the diplomatic service from a floating city that moved between worlds, facilitating first contact protocols with newly discovered civilizations. Her enhanced abilities allowed her to navigate the complex cultural and biological differences between species while maintaining the essentially human perspective that made her valuable as a translator between different forms of consciousness. Beth Harrison Stone led the Biotechnology Institute in developing medical advances through human-alien cooperation. Her laboratory cities orbited gas giants where she could access the unique energy fields necessary for her hybrid research. The youngest daughter had become the most celebrated scientist in human space, creating technologies that healed genetic damage across multiple species. Jake's dream of rebuilding the Modoc Nation had evolved into something greater than either he or Mary had imagined during their early days in the Crystal Caves. The warrior tradition had spread across human space as a philosophy of resistance and adaptation that appealed to people of all genetic backgrounds. Enhanced humans who embraced both their augmented abilities and their cultural heritage called themselves Modoc warriors regardless of their actual ancestry. The philosophy emphasized protection of genetic minorities, peaceful coexistence with alien species, and the preservation of cultural diversity within human civilization. Jake's original oath of protection had grown into a movement that encompassed millions of people across dozens of worlds. The last Modoc warrior had become the first of a new kind of human community. Mary served as Director of Interspecies Relations from her office in the Collective Embassy, a crystalline structure that existed partially in normal space and partially in the dimensional frameworks used by the ancient beings. Her unique experience as both victim and opponent of genetic persecution made her the ideal mediator between human concerns and alien perspectives. The red brand on her wrist had been transformed from mark of shame into badge of honor through surgical artistry that incorporated alien biotechnology. The scar now glowed with soft light that shifted color based on her emotional state, turning her former curse into a beautiful reminder of the journey from persecution to acceptance. Branded women across human space had undergone similar transformations, wearing their marks with pride. The gardens where Mary walked with her grandchildren represented the physical manifestation of interspecies cooperation. Human engineering had created the growing medium, while alien biotechnology provided the genetic templates for plants that could not exist in nature. The flowers bloomed in patterns that told stories in both human languages and alien harmonics. Tommy Harrison running. Bear was 5 years old and showed his grandfather Jake's enhanced physical abilities, combined with his grandmother Mary's analytical intelligence. The boy moved through the alien garden with supernatural grace while asking penetrating questions about the energy patterns that made the hybrid plants possible. He represented the first generation born into a world where human-alien cooperation was normal rather than revolutionary. Sarah Harrison Whisper was 3 years old and demonstrated an intuitive connection to alien consciousness that exceeded even Beth's technological interfaces. The little girl could communicate directly with the Whispers and other energy-based species, serving as a bridge between biological and energy-based forms of consciousness. Her abilities suggested possibilities for human development that neither species had previously imagined. The children played games that would have been impossible before the alliance between their families and alien civilizations. They could manipulate gravity fields with their thoughts, reshape matter through biotechnology interfaces, and communicate across vast distances using enhanced consciousness networks. But they also played with simple toys and told silly jokes, remaining recognizably human despite their extraordinary capabilities. Jake watched his grandchildren with satisfaction, tempered by awareness of the challenges they would face. The extremist groups that opposed interspecies cooperation had not disappeared but had simply adapted their tactics to the new political reality. Some humans still believed that genetic purity and territorial expansion represented their species' destiny among the stars. The collective had established monitoring stations throughout human space to ensure compliance with the agreements that had prevented humanity's destruction, but their presence also created opportunities for humans who could learn to work within galactic civilization rather than against it. Jake's warrior tradition was evolving to meet these new challenges. Mary's role as Director of Interspecies Relations required her to mediate conflicts between human communities and alien civilizations on a regular basis. The branded woman who had once fled persecution now helped prevent the kinds of misunderstandings that could trigger galactic wars. Her engineering background proved valuable in developing technological solutions to political problems. The evening sky above. New Harmony showed the lights of dozens of different species, ships moving between the stars on peaceful missions of trade and exploration. The collective's crystalline vessels maintained their patrol patterns, but they no longer represented a threat to human survival. Instead, they served as reminders of the larger galactic community that humanity had joined. Kate's children showed different combinations of human and alien enhancement than their mother's generation. Some possessed abilities that exceeded anything the Whispers had originally granted, while others demonstrated entirely new capabilities that resulted from the continued evolution of hybrid consciousness. The enhanced human core was becoming something beyond its original military purpose. Lucy's diplomatic work had established human colonies that existed in true partnership with alien civilizations, rather than simply occupying the same space. These communities developed hybrid cultures that preserved essential elements of both human and alien traditions while creating new forms of expression that neither species could achieve alone. Beth's research had eliminated the genetic defects that had originally justified the colonial breeding programs, but more importantly, her work had demonstrated that genetic diversity strengthened rather than weakened human potential for development. The branded women had been proven correct in their resistance to genetic control policies. As the alien sun set behind the Crystal Mountains, Mary joined Jake on the observation deck of their home, a structure that incorporated both Modoc architectural principles and Whisper energy technology. They watched their grandchildren's bedtime routine, conducted in 3 languages and accompanied by lullabies that harmonized human melodies with alien sound patterns. The oath Jake had sworn 5 years ago had grown into something that neither of them could have imagined during their desperate flight from colonial persecution. Their personal alliance had become the foundation for humanity's transformation from an aggressive species threatening galactic stability into a valuable member of interspecies civilization. Cursed Mother and the last Modoc warrior had become the blessed ancestors whose courage, under alien stars, proved that love and determination could overcome any form of oppression. Their legacy lived in every enhanced human who chose cooperation over conquest, in every branded woman who wore her mark with pride, and in every child who grew up believing that diversity made humanity stronger rather than weaker. The stars above New Harmony belonged to all the species that called this galaxy home, and humanity had finally earned its place among them. Mary Harrison stood at the edge of New Terra Colony, watching the last transport ship disappear into the purple sky. The ship carried families with sons, families with hope, families with a future among the stars. She touched the red mark burned into her wrist 3 years ago when the doctors confirmed what everyone already knew. She was cursed. She could only make daughters. Her 3 girls sat on old supply boxes behind her, sharing the last protein bar from their meager rations. Kate was 15 now, with her mother's dark hair and stubborn jaw. Lucy had turned 12 last month and still asked why other kids were not allowed to play with them. Beth was only 8 but already understood that their family was different in ways that made people afraid. The colony buzzed with whispers whenever Mary walked through the market. Women pulled their sons closer when she passed. Men looked at her with disgust or pity, sometimes both. The red brand on her wrist marked her as one of the barren, women whose genetics had failed humanity's great mission to spread across the galaxy. Colonial Administrator Frank Miller had announced new laws last week. All branded women would report to the medical center for sterilization procedures. The colony needed every resource focused on producing male children for the war effort against alien threats. Women who could only bear daughters were now considered a drain on society, a genetic dead end that humanity could not afford. Mary remembered when she first arrived on New Terra 15 years ago with her husband Danny. They had dreams of building a new life under alien stars, of raising children who would explore worlds beyond imagination. Danny died in a mining accident when Kate was 5, leaving Mary to raise 3 daughters alone in a world that increasingly saw them as failures. The brand burned when she thought about Danny. He had loved their daughters fiercely, never once showing disappointment that they were not sons. He would have fought the branding ceremony, would have stood between Mary and the hot iron that marked her as defective. But Danny was gone and Mary faced the colony's judgment alone. She watched her daughters share food and felt her heart break. Kate tried to make Lucy and Beth laugh with silly jokes. Lucy braided Beth's hair with gentle fingers. Beth drew pictures in the dirt of fantastic creatures she imagined living in the colony's outer forests. They were smart, kind, brave children who deserved better than the shame society placed on them. Other branded women had already reported to the medical center. Mary heard their screams through the thin walls of the colony buildings. Some women emerged broken, staring at nothing with empty eyes. Others never emerged at all. The colony's records listed them as casualties of necessary procedures, acceptable losses in humanity's struggle for survival. Mary's mother had been branded too back on Earth. 4 daughters and no sons had earned her the mark of failure in the old world. When the colonial ships offered new chances among the stars, her mother had believed things would be different. But humanity carried its fears and prejudices across light years of empty space. The brand followed them to New Terra and beyond. Children born in recent years showed a disturbing pattern. Male births had dropped to 30% across all human colonies. Scientists blamed radiation from alien suns, chemical interactions with foreign atmospheres, or genetic drift from extended space travel. Whatever the cause, sons had become precious resources while daughters were seen as reminders of humanity's declining fertility. The colonial authority demanded action. Every male child would be evaluated for military or scientific potential. The best would receive enhanced education and genetic improvements to maximize their value to human civilization. Meanwhile, families that produced only daughters would be discouraged from further reproduction. The branded women represented the ultimate expression of this policy. Mary had worked as an engineer before the branding, helping design the terraforming systems that made New Terra habitable. Her technical knowledge had earned respect and decent wages for her family. But the red mark changed everything. Employers would not hire branded women for important work. The colony needed engineers, but not ones whose genetics marked them as failures. She found work cleaning buildings and serving food in the colony's cafeteria. The pay barely covered rent for their small apartment in the worst section of town. Kate had started skipping school to help earn money by doing odd jobs for merchants. Lucy spent her days watching Beth while Mary worked. Their childhood was disappearing under the weight of society's rejection. The transport ship had vanished completely now, leaving only the evening stars visible in the darkening sky. Mary made a decision that would change everything. She would not report to the medical center tomorrow. She would not let them cut away her ability to love and create life. She would not surrender her daughters to a world that saw them as worthless. Storage sheds behind the colony contained emergency supplies for disasters or alien attacks. Mary had helped inventory those supplies during her engineering days. She knew where to find food, water purification tablets, basic medical equipment, and wilderness survival gear. Taking those supplies would be theft, but staying would mean death or worse. She turned to her daughters and saw them watching her with trust and hope. Kate understood the situation better than the younger girls, but all 3 looked to their mother for protection and guidance. Mary had no idea how they would survive in the alien wilderness beyond the colony's protective barriers. She only knew they had to try. The colony's defense grid would track any vehicle leaving the settlement, but the outer fence had maintenance gaps where small groups could slip through on foot. Mary had noticed these vulnerabilities during her engineering work, filing reports that administrators ignored due to budget constraints. Now those security flaws offered their only chance at freedom. Night fell quickly on New Terra with its rapid rotation and distant sun. Mary gathered her daughters and led them toward their apartment one last time. They would pack light, take only essential items that could fit in hiking backpacks. Everything else they would leave behind, including the life they had built in the world that had rejected them. Tomorrow the colony would discover that the cursed woman and her worthless daughters had vanished into the wilderness. Some would call it good riddance. Others might worry about their survival among alien predators and harsh environments. But none would follow them into the unknown forests where branded women and their children could disappear forever from humanity's judgment. Jake Running Bear moved through the alien forest like a shadow, his enhanced senses tracking the colonial patrol that had passed through this area 3 hours ago. His people, the Modoc, had once fought the United States Army in the mountains of Northern California. Now he fought their descendants among the stars, carrying forward a war that had begun on Earth and followed humanity across the galaxy. The purple trees of Kepler 442b grew in twisted spirals that would confuse most humans, but Jake read the landscape like a book written in his grandfather's language. Every broken branch told a story of passage. Every disturbed patch of silver moss revealed the weight and speed of those who had walked here. The colonial soldiers left tracks as obvious as shouts in a library. 3 years had passed since the colonial authority destroyed the Modoc settlement in the northern continent. Jake's wife Sarah and their 2 children had died in the orbital bombardment that reduced their village to radioactive glass. The authorities claimed the Modoc were interfering with terraforming operations, but Jake knew the truth. His people had discovered something the colonials wanted to keep secret. The forest held memories of his lost family in every shadow. Sarah had loved to walk among these twisted trees, pointing out native creatures that resembled animals from Earth's ancient past. Their son Peter had climbed these purple branches with fearless joy, while their daughter Hope collected the strange crystalline flowers that grew in spiral patterns around the tree bases. Now Jake walked alone through their favorite places, hunting the people who had taken everything from him. His targeting system displayed tactical information directly in his vision, a gift from the mysterious beings his people called the Whispers. The aliens had appeared after the bombardment, offering Jake enhanced abilities in exchange for his commitment to resist colonial expansion. The technology merged seamlessly with his nervous system, turning him into something more than human while keeping his essential self intact. The Whispers spoke in sounds like wind through canyon walls, their words forming meaning directly in Jake's mind rather than his ears. They claimed to represent older civilizations that viewed humanity's aggressive expansion with growing concern. But they respected individual acts of resistance, especially from indigenous peoples who understood the pain of displacement and cultural destruction. Jake's enhanced hearing picked up the distant hum of colonial vehicles approaching from the east. His skin tingled with electromagnetic radiation from their communication equipment. The patrol was returning early from their sweep of the southern valleys, probably having found nothing worth reporting to their superiors back at the main base. He positioned himself along their most likely route, choosing a cluster of boulder-sized crystal formations that would provide cover while offering clear sight lines. His rifle was a hybrid of human engineering and alien technology, capable of firing energy bursts that could disable vehicles or pierce personal armor. More importantly, it was completely silent and left no ballistic evidence for colonial investigators. The patrol consisted of 6 soldiers in standard combat armor, riding in 2 lightweight vehicles designed for forest reconnaissance. Jake recognized their leader as Sergeant Bill Hayes, a man who had participated in the bombardment of the Modoc settlement. Hayes wore a necklace of small bones that Jake suspected came from his people's burial grounds, desecrated during the colonial occupation. Jake could kill all 6 soldiers within 30 seconds. His enhanced reflexes and alien weapons made such tactics almost trivially easy, but random violence would not honor his fallen family or advance the cause of resistance. Instead, he waited for the right moment to strike with precision and purpose. The vehicles slowed as they navigated a narrow passage between 2 large crystal outcroppings. Jake's first shot disabled the lead vehicle's power cell, causing it to coast to a stop. His second shot took out the communication array on the trailing vehicle before the soldiers could call for backup. 6 confused and frightened humans found themselves stranded in hostile territory with no way to contact their base. Jake emerged from cover with his rifle trained on Sergeant Hayes. The other soldiers reached for their weapons but stopped when they saw the red targeting dots that appeared on their chest plates. Jake's voice carried the authority of someone who had already accepted death as a possible outcome of this encounter. He spoke in English with the accent his grandfather had carried from the old country. Sergeant Hayes, you wear the bones of my people around your neck. Remove them now and place them on the ground with proper respect. Hayes tried to maintain military bearing despite his obvious fear. You're the one they call Running Bear. There's a bounty on your head worth more than most soldiers see in 5 years. My men have families to feed and bills to pay. Stand down and we can negotiate. Jake's enhanced vision analyzed Hayes's body language, heart rate, and stress indicators. The man was planning something desperate, probably hoping one of his soldiers could get a clear shot while Jake was distracted by conversation. Such tactics might work against normal humans, but Jake's alien enhancements made him effectively superhuman in combat situations. Your families feast on food grown in soil mixed with the ashes of my children, Jake replied. Your bills are paid with money earned by stealing land that belonged to others. There will be no negotiation. He fired a precise shot that severed the cord holding the bone necklace without harming Hayes himself. The bones scattered across the forest floor, finally free from their captor's possession. Jake knelt and gathered them carefully, whispering prayers his grandmother had taught him in the old language. The soldiers watched in nervous silence as Jake performed the burial ritual. They had been trained to see him as a terrorist and savage, but his reverence for the remains of his people revealed a dignity that their propaganda had not prepared them to recognize. Several of the younger soldiers looked uncomfortable with their role in this conflict. Jake stood and faced the patrol again. His alien-enhanced senses detected no immediate threats, but he remained ready for violence if the soldiers forced his hand. Return to your base and tell your commanders that the Modoc remember. Tell them that some wounds cannot heal while the injustice continues. Tell them that Jake Running Bear walks these forests and will not stop until balance is restored. He melted back into the purple shadows, leaving the soldiers with their disabled vehicles and a long walk back to colonial territory. They would report the encounter, of course. Military patrols would increase in this area, making his activities more dangerous. But the whispers had shown him safe places where colonial technology could not reach, hidden valleys where time moved differently and the laws of physics bent toward older truths. Jake found one of these refugees as the alien sun set behind the Crystal Mountains. The whispers materialized around him like living aurora, their presence both comforting and unsettling. They spoke of changes coming to this sector of space, of human conflicts that would soon attract attention from powers beyond current imagination. But tonight Jake simply mourned his family and planned his next strike against the people who had destroyed his world. Jake discovered the small camp at dawn while tracking a colonial supply convoy through the eastern valleys. His enhanced senses detected human heat signatures in a depression between two fallen crystal trees. But something felt wrong about the scene. These humans were not moving with military precision or following standard patrol routes. They huddled together like refugees rather than soldiers. He approached carefully through the silver undergrowth, his alien-enhanced vision analyzing the camp from multiple angles. A woman sat with her back against a purple tree trunk, holding a pulse rifle with hands that shook from exhaustion rather than fear. 3 children slept nearby under a makeshift shelter constructed from stolen colonial supplies. The woman's clothes bore the mark of someone who had fled in haste with only essential items. Jake's targeting system identified the woman as a potential threat, but his human instincts recognized something familiar in her posture. She held herself like someone who refused to surrender despite impossible odds. The same stance his wife Sarah had taken during the final moments before the orbital bombardment. This woman was protecting her children against overwhelming forces, just as he had failed to protect his own family. The red mark on her wrist became visible as she shifted position to watch the forest. Jake had seen such brands before on other colonial refugees who had escaped the settlement's rigid social controls. The colonial authority marked women whose genetics were deemed unsuitable for their breeding programs, turning them into outcasts within their own communities. The youngest child stirred and opened her eyes, catching sight of Jake's position in the undergrowth. Instead of crying out in alarm, she studied him with the fearless curiosity that children sometimes showed toward new and interesting things. Her calm reaction prevented what could have become a violent confrontation between desperate people in dangerous circumstances. Jake made his decision and stepped into the open with his rifle lowered but ready. The woman swung her weapon toward him with movements that suggested basic training, but little combat experience. Her finger found the trigger, but she hesitated when she saw his traditional tattoos and the alien technology integrated into his equipment. "You are far from the colony," Jake said in English, keeping his voice calm and non-threatening. "These forests hold dangers the colonial maps do not show. Your children will not survive long without proper shelter and food." Mary kept her rifle trained on him while studying his appearance. His skin bore intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living art. His weapons were clearly beyond standard colonial technology, suggesting access to resources that official channels would never provide. But his eyes held sadness rather than malice, and his stance suggested protection rather than aggression. "We cannot go back," Mary replied, her voice steady despite her obvious exhaustion. "They want to cut out my ability to have more children. They say my daughters are proof that I am genetically defective. We would rather die free than live as prisoners in their medical facilities." Jake understood her situation without needing detailed explanation. He had watched the colonial authority implement increasingly harsh policies against anyone who did not fit their narrow vision of genetic acceptability. Indigenous peoples, ethnic minorities, and women who produced daughters instead of sons all faced persecution under the new regulations. The sound of search drones echoed from the eastern sky, their electronic whine growing louder as they approached the area. Jake recognized the specific frequency patterns of colonial reconnaissance equipment designed to detect human heat signatures and electromagnetic emissions. The woman and her children would be discovered within minutes unless they found better cover. "Follow me," Jake said, shouldering his rifle and moving toward a cluster of crystal formations that would block the drone's scanning systems. "Quickly and quietly. Your lives depend on moving like shadows now." Mary hesitated for a moment before gathering her daughters and following Jake deeper into the alien forest. Kate helped carry their supplies while Lucy guided Beth through the difficult terrain. The family moved with surprising coordination, suggesting they had already learned hard lessons about survival in hostile environments. Jake led them to a concealed entrance in what appeared to be a solid, crystal cliff face. The opening was invisible until they stood directly in front of it, protected by alien technology that bent light around the cave mouth. Inside, the cavern opened into a network of tunnels that his people had used for shelter during their resistance against colonial occupation. The caves maintained comfortable temperature through geothermal vents that also provided clean water and limited light. Jake had stocked this particular refuge with supplies taken from colonial convoys, including food rations, medical equipment, and communications gear. The space could support a small group for several weeks if necessary. Beth explored the cave with wonder, running her small hands over walls that sparkled with embedded crystals. Lucy helped her mother inventory their remaining supplies while Kate examined Jake's equipment with the sharp intelligence of someone who understood technology. The family adapted to their new environment with resilience that impressed even Jake's enhanced analytical capabilities. "Why are you helping us?" Mary asked as they shared a meal of colonial rations supplemented with edible plants Jake had gathered from the forest. "We are strangers to you, and helping us puts you at risk." Jake considered his answer while watching the three daughters interact with their mother. Their bond reminded him of his own lost family, of the love that transcended genetic categories and social prejudices. But more than personal sympathy, he recognized in Mary someone whose skills could advance the resistance against colonial oppression. "You were an engineer," Jake observed, noting the way Mary had automatically analyzed the cave's structural features and water systems. "Your knowledge of colonial technology could be valuable to people who oppose their expansion, and your daughters deserve to grow up free from the fear that marks their mother's wrist." Mary studied Jake's face, seeing past the alien enhancements to the human pain that drove his actions. She recognized a kindred spirit in someone who had lost everything to the same system that now pursued her family. But she also sensed something else in his offer of protection, a possibility for mutual benefit that could serve both their causes. "What do you want in exchange for sanctuary?" she asked, demonstrating the practical thinking that had helped her survive as a single mother in an increasingly hostile society. Jake smiled for the first time since the destruction of his settlement. "I want to teach your daughters how to fight back. The Whispers have shown me technologies that could enhance their natural abilities, make them into warriors capable of protecting themselves and others. But such gifts require commitment to something larger than personal survival." The cave fell silent except for the gentle sound of water flowing through crystal channels. Mary looked at her three daughters, seeing in their young faces the potential for something beyond the limitations society had placed on them. Kate already showed leadership qualities and tactical thinking. Lucy demonstrated empathy and communication skills that could bridge different communities. Beth possessed an intuitive understanding of technology that surpassed many adults. Outside the cave, colonial search drones continued their methodical sweep of the forest, seeking the branded woman and her cursed children who had dared to escape their designated fate. Inside the hidden refuge, an alliance formed between unlikely partners who would reshape the future of human resistance among the stars. 2 weeks after Mary's family found refuge in the Crystal Caves, colonial forces launched a massive sweep of the eastern settlements. Jake's monitoring equipment detected troop movements, orbital bombardment preparations, and communication traffic that indicated Administrator Miller had authorized extreme measures to locate the escaped branded woman. The colonial military treated her disappearance as a direct challenge to their authority over human genetics. Jake and Mary watched from a hidden observation post as colonial soldiers burned the small farming community of Haven Valley. Families who had lived there for 5 years were loaded into transport vehicles for relocation to the main colony. Their homes, built with years of hard labor in alien soil, burned behind them as punishment for possibly harboring genetic fugitives. Among the refugees, Jake recognized Elena Santos, a teacher who had helped Modoc children before the bombardment of his settlement. Colonial soldiers forced her to watch as they destroyed her classroom and the books she had collected from Earth. Elena's crime was teaching indigenous history alongside approved colonial curriculum, sharing stories that reminded people of resistance and cultural survival. Mary felt sick watching the destruction of innocent people's lives. Her decision to flee had triggered this retaliation against communities that had nothing to do with her escape. The guilt weighed heavily until Kate pointed out that the colonial authorities were responsible for their own choices. Mary had simply refused to accept injustice, while Administrator Miller chose to respond with collective punishment. The crisis deepened when colonial soldiers captured 3 families trying to escape the sweep. Jake's enhanced vision identified 2 branded women among the prisoners, along with their children and husbands who had chosen to support them. The colonial forces prepared to make examples of these people, planning public executions to discourage further resistance to the genetic control programs. Mary insisted on attempting a rescue, despite the obvious dangers. She had been an engineer long enough to understand the weaknesses in colonial security systems, and her technical knowledge could give them advantages that Jake's warrior skills alone could not provide. But the mission would require splitting their small group and leaving the safety of their hidden refuge. Jake initially opposed the plan, arguing that Mary's daughters were too young and untrained for such dangerous work. But Kate, Lucy, and Beth surprised him by demonstrating abilities they had developed during their weeks in the caves. The Whispers had begun teaching them in subtle ways, enhancing their natural talents while they slept and played among the crystal formations. Kate showed remarkable, tactical thinking as she analyzed colonial patrol routes and identified weak points in their security perimeter. Lucy demonstrated an intuitive understanding of the alien environment that allowed her to move through the forest almost as silently as Jake himself. Beth displayed an unusual connection to the crystalline technology that powered their refuge, manipulating its systems with ease that astonished even the Whispers. The rescue mission became a test of their growing partnership and the enhanced abilities of Mary's daughters. Jake provided covering fire from elevated positions, while Mary used her engineering knowledge to disable the colonial transport vehicles. Kate led her sisters in a precise strike that freed the prisoners without alerting the main force. During the escape, colonial soldiers wounded Kate with a grazing energy blast that should have been minor. But Mary's fierce protection of her injured daughter revealed something in her character that impressed even Jake's enhanced analytical systems. She killed 3 armed soldiers with improvised weapons and tactical thinking that demonstrated natural warrior instincts beneath her engineer's training. The successful rescue established Mary as more than a refugee seeking protection. Her combination of technical knowledge, strategic thinking, and fierce maternal instincts made her a valuable partner in the resistance against colonial oppression. Jake began to see possibilities for expanding their operations beyond simple survival and occasional sabotage missions. That night, as Mary tended to Kate's wound in the safety of their cave refuge, Jake made a decision that would bind their fates together permanently. He approached her with ceremony and gravity that reflected the seriousness of what he intended to offer. The Whispers gathered around them like living aurora, their presence adding weight to the moment. Jake spoke in the formal language his grandmother had taught him for the most sacred occasions. Mary Harrison, mother of daughters who fight like eagles, I offer you the warrior's oath of protection. I swear by the spirits of my ancestors and the power of the Whispers that your bloodline will know no fear of persecution for bearing females. Your children and their children will grow strong and free under my protection. The ceremony required response in kind, but Mary had no formal traditions to draw upon except the engineer's oath she had taken when first joining the colonial service. She adapted those words to fit their current situation, creating something new from old forms. Jake Running Bear, last warrior of the Modoc among the stars, I accept your oath and offer my own. I swear by the love I bear my daughters that I will help you rebuild your people not as they were, but as they can become in this new world." The Whispers approved this exchange with harmonics that resonated through the crystal formations around them. Their alien understanding recognized the binding of two bloodlines that had both suffered under colonial oppression, but retained the strength to resist. The energy beings began preparing enhancements for Mary that would allow her to fully participate in the coming conflicts. Mary's acceptance of the oath represented more than personal alliance. She understood that their partnership offered strategic advantages neither could achieve alone. Jake's enhanced abilities and alien technology combined with her engineering knowledge and maternal motivation created possibilities for resistance that could challenge colonial authority on multiple levels. The rescued families integrated into their growing refuge over the following days. Elena Santos resumed teaching, now focusing on subjects that colonial schools forbade. The other branded women shared their technical skills and knowledge of colonial operations. Their husbands and children adapted to life in the alien environment with support from the Whispers. As word of the successful rescue spread through hidden networks, other resistance groups began reaching out for coordination and support. Jake and Mary found themselves at the center of a growing movement that combined indigenous resistance traditions with colonial technological knowledge and alien enhancement capabilities. Kate recovered from her injury with accelerated healing that suggested the Whispers were already beginning her enhancement process. Lucy and Beth showed similar improvements in their physical and mental capabilities as the alien energy beings prepared them for the larger role they would play in the coming conflict. The oath sworn under alien stars transformed a desperate alliance into something that would challenge the foundation of colonial authority. Two people who had lost everything to the same oppressive system discovered that their combined strengths could build something new from the ruins of their old lives. The branded woman and the last Modoc warrior had become partners in a resistance that would reshape humanity's future among the stars. News of Mary's rescue mission spread through underground networks faster than Administrator Miller could contain it. Within days, coded messages reached branded women across 3 colonial sectors, telling the story of the cursed mother who had chosen freedom over sterilization. Her daughters had fought alongside alien-enhanced warriors to free other genetic outcasts from colonial persecution. The branded mark was becoming a symbol of resistance rather than shame. Jake's monitoring systems detected increasing military activity as colonial forces responded to the growing rebellion. Orbital platforms moved into position above major settlements while ground troops implemented martial law protocols. Administrator Miller appeared on colony-wide broadcasts, declaring genetic fugitives to be enemies of human survival who threatened the species' expansion among the stars. The colonial propaganda painted Mary as a dangerous terrorist whose corrupted genetics drove her to violence against innocent families. But the rescued women told different stories through their own networks. They described her tactical brilliance, her fierce protection of children, and her refusal to abandon people facing the same persecution she had escaped. Mary became larger than life in the whispered conversations of oppressed communities. Jake's alien allies revealed disturbing intelligence about the scope of colonial plans. The Whispers had infiltrated colonial communication networks using their energy-based forms, discovering that the genetic control programs were only the beginning of a larger transformation of human society. Administrator Miller answered to authorities beyond the local colonial government, people with resources and plans that extended far beyond New Terra. The terraforming systems Mary had helped design contained hidden protocols that could sterilize entire worlds of biological life. These weapons were not intended primarily for use against alien civilizations, but for controlling human populations that refused to conform to genetic engineering programs. Worlds that resisted the new breeding policies could be rendered uninhabitable, forcing their populations into compliance or extinction. Mary's engineering background allowed her to understand the technical specifications the Whispers shared with their growing resistance network. The terraforming weapons required specific activation codes that only senior engineers possessed, but Mary knew the underlying systems well enough to potentially disable or redirect them. Her knowledge made her invaluable to the resistance and an extreme threat to colonial authority. The situation escalated when colonial forces captured Elena Santos during a raid on a hidden school she had established for refugee children. Elena's arrest was broadcast across the colony as a warning to anyone supporting genetic fugitives. Administrator Miller announced that she would face public execution unless Mary Harrison surrendered herself within 72 hours. Jake argued against attempting another rescue, pointing out that Elena's capture was obviously a trap designed to lure Mary into colonial custody. But Mary refused to abandon the teacher, who had risked everything to educate children that society had written off as genetically worthless. The decision to proceed with the rescue became a defining moment for their growing resistance movement. Kate, Lucy, and Beth had developed remarkable abilities under the Whisper's enhancement programs. Kate could interface directly with electronic systems, her consciousness extending into computer networks in ways that exceeded normal human-machine interaction. Lucy had gained enhanced physical capabilities that allowed her to move through hostile environments with supernatural grace and stealth. Beth demonstrated an intuitive understanding of alien technology that let her modify captured colonial equipment in ways that defied engineering logic. The rescue plan required splitting their forces, while colonial security was at maximum alert. Jake would lead a diversionary attack on the colonial military depot to draw attention away from the detention center where Elena was held. Mary and her daughters would infiltrate the facility using her knowledge of its security systems and their enhanced abilities to overcome electronic defenses. The mission revealed the true extent of the changes taking place in Mary's family. Kate's technological interface abilities allowed her to take control of the detention center's entire security network, turning its own systems against the colonial guards. Lucy moved through the facility like a living shadow, neutralizing sentries without raising alarms. Beth modified captured weapons to use alien energy sources that made them far more effective than their original designs. But the rescue also exposed them to new dangers as colonial forces deployed experimental weapons designed specifically to counter alien enhancement technology. Administrator Miller had been studying captured Whisper energy signatures and developing countermeasures that could disrupt the Resistance's technological advantages. The detention center was equipped with systems that caused intense pain to anyone carrying alien modifications. Mary pressed forward despite the agony the anti-alien systems caused her enhanced daughters. Her maternal fury overcame technological barriers as she fought through security checkpoints to reach Elena's cell. The teacher was barely conscious after days of interrogation, but she managed to whisper crucial intelligence about colonial plans before Mary evacuated her from the facility. Elena revealed that Administrator Miller was preparing to deploy the terraforming weapons against the Resistance bases in the northern mountains. The Colonial Authority had located several Whisper energy signatures and planned to sterilize those areas completely, eliminating both the alien allies and their human partners in a single devastating strike. The attack was scheduled for the following week, leaving little time for evacuation or countermeasures. The successful rescue came at great cost as colonial forces surrounded their escape route. Jake's diversionary attack had drawn heavy response, but not enough to clear the path back to their hidden refuges. Mary and her daughters found themselves trapped in hostile territory with an injured teacher and colonial reinforcements closing in from all directions. Kate made the decision that saved them by sacrificing their secure base in the Crystal Caves. She triggered an overload in the alien technology that powered their refuge, creating an electromagnetic pulse that disabled all colonial equipment within a 50-kilometer radius. The explosion could be seen from orbit, marking their location for future attacks but clearing a temporary escape corridor. The retreat took them deeper into the alien wilderness than any humans had previously explored. The Whispers guided them to ancient sites where their energy-based civilization had left infrastructure from thousands of years ago. These locations offered sanctuary but also revealed the true scope of the conflict they had joined. The Whispers were not simply local aliens opposing human expansion. They represented an alliance of civilizations that had been watching humanity's development with growing concern. Human genetic engineering programs and territorial ambitions had attracted attention from powers that could destroy Earth's entire civilization if they perceived humanity as a galactic threat. Mary realized that their personal struggle against colonial oppression was part of a larger conflict that would determine humanity's future among the stars. The branded women and their children had become symbols in a war between different visions of human development. Administrator Miller represented the path of genetic control and territorial expansion, while Mary's resistance offered an alternative based on diversity and cooperation with alien civilizations. As they established new refugees in the ancient alien sites, Mary and Jake began planning operations that would challenge the colonial authority on multiple fronts. Their daughters had become enhanced warriors capable of extraordinary feats, but they would need additional allies and resources to face the terraforming weapons that threatened all life on New Terra. The rising storm of rebellion would soon test whether their alliance could survive the full power of colonial retaliation. Kate Harrison moved through the colonial military compound like a digital ghost, her consciousness flowing through their computer networks, while her enhanced body maintained perfect stealth in physical space. At 17, she had become something beyond normal human capabilities, a fusion of her mother's engineering, brilliance, and alien enhancement technology that made her the most dangerous person on New Terra. The mission to prevent the terraforming weapon deployment required coordinated strikes against 3 separate facilities simultaneously. Kate led the electronic warfare team while Lucy commanded the stealth infiltration units, and Beth directed the alien technology specialists. Their mother Mary coordinated overall strategy from the command center Jake had established in an ancient whisper installation deep in the northern mountains. 2 years had passed since Jake's oath of protection, and Mary's daughters had grown into warriors whose capabilities surpassed anything the colonial military could deploy against them. But their enhanced abilities came with responsibilities that weighed heavily on their young shoulders. They fought not just for their own freedom, but for the future of human civilization among the stars. The colonial authorities had responded to their growing rebellion with increasingly desperate measures. Administrator Miller now commanded orbital bombardment platforms, genetically enhanced super soldiers, and experimental weapons designed to counter alien technology. The conflict had escalated beyond simple resistance into a war for the soul of humanity's expansion into the galaxy. Kate's digital infiltration revealed the full horror of the terraforming weapon system. The devices were not designed merely to sterilize planetary surfaces, but to rewrite the genetic structure of all biological life in targeted areas. Any humans caught in the weapon's effects would be transformed into compliant organisms whose reproduction would be completely controlled by colonial authorities. The intelligence Kate gathered showed that Administrator Miller planned to use the weapons against resistance bases throughout the sector, but the primary target was Earth itself, where growing opposition to the genetic control programs threatened the colonial authorities' power structure. Miller intended to demonstrate the weapons' effectiveness on New Terra before deploying them against humanity's home world. Lucy's infiltration teams discovered that the colonial super soldiers were not volunteers but victims of forced genetic modification programs. Young men who had been taken from their families were subjected to procedures that enhanced their physical capabilities while destroying their capacity for independent thought. These modified humans served as perfect soldiers who could not question orders or feel compassion for their targets. The revelation about the super soldiers created moral complications for the resistance fighters. Lucy insisted on trying to save these victims of colonial experimentation, while Kate argued that they were too dangerous to approach without lethal force. Beth proposed using her alien technology interface abilities to try reversing the modification procedures, but such attempts would require capturing super soldiers alive in combat situations. Jake supported Lucy's position based on his own experience with enhancement technology. The Whispers had shown him that alien modifications could be designed to preserve human consciousness and free will, unlike the colonial procedures that seemed designed to eliminate both. If they could demonstrate that enhanced humans could remain fully human, it would undermine the colonial authorities' justification for their genetic control programs. The first major battle occurred when colonial forces attempted to establish a terraforming weapon installation in the eastern valleys. Beth's team disabled the facility's defensive systems using modified alien technology, while Kate's electronic warfare specialists took control of the colonial communication networks. Lucy led the assault team that captured the installation and rescued the construction workers who had been forced to build their own destruction. The rescued workers provided crucial intelligence, About the weapon system's vulnerabilities, the terraforming devices required constant monitoring by trained engineers to prevent catastrophic overloads that could sterilize entire continents. Mary realized that her knowledge of the original terraforming systems gave her the ability to trigger such overloads remotely, turning the weapons into planet-killing bombs that would destroy anyone attempting to use them. Word of the resistance. Victories spread through underground networks faster than colonial authorities could suppress it. Branded women across multiple worlds began organizing their own resistance cells, using techniques learned from Mary's example and alien technology provided by Whisper allies. The symbol of the red brand transformed from shame into pride as mothers refused to let their daughters be classified as genetic failures. Administrator Miller responded by declaring a state of genetic emergency that gave him authority to implement final solutions for the branded population. All women bearing the red marks would be executed immediately, while their children would be placed in modification programs designed to correct their genetic deficiencies. The policy represented a complete abandonment of any pretense that the colonial authorities served human interests rather than controlling them. The declaration triggered massive resistance across the colonial territories as families realized that compliance would mean death or slavery for their loved ones. Colonial settlements split between those who supported the genetic purity programs and those who refused to surrender their children to modification facilities. Civil war erupted across multiple worlds as humanity turned against itself. Kate's electronic warfare capabilities proved decisive in the early stages of the broader conflict. She could disable colonial military equipment, redirect their supply shipments, and feed false intelligence to their command networks. But more importantly, she could breach the information barriers that kept colonial populations ignorant of the resistance movement's true goals and achievements. Lucy's special operations teams began liberating modification facilities and freeing the victims of genetic experimentation. Her enhanced physical capabilities allowed her to lead rescue missions that normal humans could never survive, while her tactical brilliance enabled her to outmaneuver colonial forces with superior numbers and equipment. The rescued victims provided both intelligence and motivation for continued resistance. Beth's mastery of alien technology opened possibilities that neither human nor Whisper scientists had previously imagined. She developed hybrid systems that combined the best features of both technological approaches, creating weapons and defensive systems that gave the resistance crucial advantages against colonial forces. Her innovations made their small numbers effective against the colonial military's overwhelming numerical superiority. The growing conflict attracted attention from other alien civilizations that had been monitoring human expansion with increasing concern. The Whispers revealed that humanity's civil war was being watched by powers that could intervene decisively if they concluded that humans posed a threat to galactic stability. The resistance fighters found themselves fighting not just for their own freedom, but for their species' right to exist as an independent civilization. Mary coordinated the overall strategy from her command center, using her engineering knowledge to identify critical vulnerabilities in the colonial infrastructure. Her transformation from branded outcast to resistance leader inspired people across human space who had been told they were genetic failures. The Cursed Mother had become the symbol of humanity's potential for growth and change. But the terraforming weapons remained the decisive factor in the conflict. Administrator Miller retained control of several installations and the ability to deploy them against resistance bases or civilian populations. The next phase of the war would determine whether Mary's daughters could prevent the colonial authority from using those weapons to end human genetic diversity forever. The Daughters of War faced their greatest test as they prepared to challenge the forces that sought to remake humanity in their own image.